Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever woken up one morning, looked at your life, and thought, this isn't the reality I dreamed of? Maybe it's the job. Maybe it's the lack of money. Maybe it's the loneliness. Or maybe it's that voice inside whispering, you're meant for more. We've all been there. And here's the truth. Most people spend their whole lives waiting for something external to change before they finally live the life they want. But I'm here to tell you a secret. You don't have to wait. You can change your reality immediately. Yes, immediately. How? By changing the meaning you give to your experiences. Think about it. Two people can face the exact same challenge. Say, losing a job. One person breaks down, says, my life is over. The other person says, this is my chance to start something new. Same event. Two completely different realities. Do you see it? Reality isn't just what happens to you. It's what you decide it means. Let me share a story. A friend of mine, Sarah, went through a painful breakup. She thought her world had ended. She spent weeks asking, why me? But then something shifted. She asked a different question. What can I learn from this? That question didn't just change her perspective. It changed her future. She started working on herself, built her dream business. And today, she says that breakup was the best thing that ever happened to her. Her reality didn't change because the world suddenly became kinder. Her reality changed because she changed the meaning. And that's the power you have. Right now, here's the formula. Catch the thought. Notice what story you're telling yourself. Challenge it. Ask, is this empowering me or limiting me? Choose differently. Give the situation a new meaning, one that serves you. It's like putting on a different pair of glasses. If you wear gray glasses, everything looks dull. Switch to bright, clear lenses, and suddenly the world shines. You might be thinking, but can it really be that fast? Yes, because meaning is instant. The moment you decide, this pain is making me stronger, your reality has already shifted. Change doesn't always start with money. It doesn't always start with success. It starts with meaning. So I want to ask you right now, what in your life have you been seeing as a burden that could actually be a gift? What situation have you labeled as the end that could actually be your beginning? If you walk away with just one truth today, let it be this. Reality is not fixed. It's flexible. It bends to the story you tell yourself. And the secret? The moment you change your meaning, you change your reality. Immediately. So don't wait for tomorrow. Don't wait for the perfect job, or the perfect relationship, or the perfect chance. You hold the power right now. Ladies and gentlemen, change the story. Change your reality. Change your life. Here are some key points related to this. Reality is shaped not by events, but by the meaning we assign to them. Two people can experience the same event, but live completely different realities. You can shift your reality instantly by shifting your perspective. Ask empowering questions like, what can I learn from this? Instead of why me? Use the formula. Catch the thought, challenge it, choose differently. Your reality changes the moment you decide to give your experiences a new meaning. Imagine this. Two people are standing in the rain. Same street, same storm. One person is cursing, frustrated, saying, this day is ruined. Why did this have to happen? Nothing ever goes right for me. They pull their jacket tighter, stomp through the puddles, angry at the world. The other person, standing just a few feet away, is laughing. They tilt their face upward, arms wide open, and say, how refreshing. This is exactly what I needed. Both are in the same weather, same drops of water falling from the sky, but their realities, completely different. What changed? Not the rain, not the clouds, only the meaning they gave to that moment. And this is the secret so many people overlook. Reality itself, life itself, isn't made of events. It's made of the meaning we attach to those events. The same situation can either break you or build you, not because of what it is, but because of what you decide it means. Think about your own life for a moment. Has there ever been something that felt like the end of the world when it happened, but years later you look back and said, that was actually one of the best things for me? Maybe it was losing a job, or failing an exam, or being rejected by someone you cared about. At the time, it stung. At the time, it felt final. But later, you realize it pushed you toward a better path, a stronger version of yourself. The event didn't change. Your interpretation of it did. A friend of mine once told me a story that illustrates this perfectly. He had been working for years in a company, pouring in effort, loyalty, countless late nights. One afternoon, he was called into the office and told his position was being cut. Just like that, his career, his stability, everything he thought he could count on vanished. He walked out of that building devastated. He described it like being punched in the stomach, like the floor had disappeared beneath him. For days, he spiraled into the meaning he had attached to it. I'm worthless. I failed. No one will ever hire me again. What am I going to do now? His reality was heavy, dark, suffocating. But something shifted after a conversation with a mentor who told him, "You're not being punished, you're being redirected." Those words stuck with him. They planted a new meaning in his mind. Instead of "I'm worthless," he tried on a new thought. Maybe this is my chance to finally create something on my own. That new meaning didn't change the fact that he'd lost his job, but it did change his reality. Within months, he launched a small business he had always dreamed about but never dared to start. Looking back, he told me, losing that job was the best thing that ever happened to me. The event didn't change. It was still a layoff. But the meaning he assigned transformed it from tragedy into opportunity. It reminds me of something Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, once said, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." He survived one of the darkest realities human beings have ever known. Yet he observed that even in the camps, some prisoners gave up while others found a way to keep hope alive. What was the difference? Not the brutality of the camp, not the hunger or the cold. It was the meaning they gave to their suffering. Frankl wrote, "Those who have a why to live can bear almost anyhow." His insight shows us that meaning is not a luxury, it's survival. And here's where it gets deeply personal. Every day, you and I are assigning meanings, often without realizing it. A colleague doesn't return your email. You might decide it means they don't respect me. Or you could choose, they're just busy. It's not about me. A friend cancels plans. You might tell yourself, I must not matter to them. Or you could say, they must be overwhelmed. I'll reach out another time. Notice how the same event creates two different realities. One reality leaves you angry and hurt. The other leaves you compassionate and calm. And the only difference is the story you chose to attach. I once met a woman who carried this lesson in the most beautiful way. She had survived a serious car accident that left her in the hospital for months. When she talked about it, she didn't say, "My life was ruined." She said, "That accident gave me the wake-up call I needed. It reminded me how precious life is." She spoke about how lying in that hospital bed taught her gratitude for the little things, the ability to walk, the sound of laughter, the warmth of sunlight on her face. She could have chosen to live in bitterness and despair. Instead, she created a reality filled with appreciation and resilience. Now, here's the fascinating part. The meaning you assign doesn't just change your emotions. It changes your actions. When you believe this is the end, you stop trying. When you believe this is the beginning, you start creating. Meaning drives behavior. Behavior creates results. Results reinforce reality. That's why changing your meaning is like flipping a switch that rewires the entire path of your life. Ask yourself, what meanings are you carrying right now that might be limiting you? Maybe you see failure as proof that you're not good enough. What if instead you saw failure as training, as the tuition you pay for success? Maybe you see rejection as evidence that you're unlovable. What if instead you saw it as protection, steering you away from what wasn't right for you? The truth is, most of us live inside stories we never chose consciously. We inherited them from parents, teachers, culture, society. Someone once told you you're not smart enough, and you decided it meant you shouldn't try. Someone ignored you once, and you decided it meant you weren't valuable. Those meanings became invisible prisons, shaping your reality without you even noticing. But here's the liberating news. You can rewrite those meanings at any time. I want you to picture your life as a movie. The events of the scenes, unchangeable, already filmed. but you're also the narrator, the voiceover that explains what's happening. If your narration is hopeless, then even the brightest scenes feel dark. But if your narration is empowering, then even the darkest scenes carry light. You are not just living the movie, you are writing the script of how it's understood. And sometimes, a single sentence can change everything. Like the words, "You're not being punished, you're being redirected." Or, "This is happening for me, not to me." Or simply, "Maybe this is the beginning, not the end." Those words can reframe pain into purpose, loss into growth, chaos into transformation. So the next time something happens that feels unbearable, ask yourself, what else could this mean? That one question unlocks doors you didn't even know were closed. Because the moment you change the meaning, you don't just think differently, you live differently. And in that shift, your entire reality begins to transform. Picture a crowded airport terminal. A sudden announcement comes over speakers. Flight delayed. Estimated departure 3 hours later. All around, you see different reactions. A man in a suit slams his briefcase down and mutters under his breath. Furious because this delay means he'll miss an important meeting. His whole day feels ruined, and he spends the next 3 hours pacing angrily. Call his office to complain, his stress level climbing higher and higher. A few seats away, a young mother with 2 kids hears the same announcement. She sighs in relief, pulls out snacks, and says with a smile, "Great, now we have time to grab some food and stretch before the long flight." Same event, same delay, 2 completely different realities unfolding side by side. And it's not the event that created the difference. It's the meaning they each gave to it. This is happening around us all the time. Think of 2 students who fail the same exam. One slams a book shut and says, "I'm done. I'll never be good at this." They give up studying altogether, their belief in themselves broken. The other looks at the failing grade and says, "All right, this just shows me what I need to work on. I'll do better next time." They start studying harder, asking questions, and eventually pass the course. The same piece of paper with the same red F creates 2 opposite futures. Because the grade didn't define their reality, the meaning did. It's easy to forget this when you're in the middle of a struggle. I remember talking to a man who lost his business during a financial crash. He told me how, at first, he thought his life was over. He stayed up at night, staring at the ceiling, thinking about all the years he had wasted, all the sacrifices that had led to nothing. To him, the business closing meant he was a failure, incapable, unlucky. But years later, when he retold that same story, he said something different. That collapse was my turning point. It forced me to reevaluate everything. It pushed me toward creating a business I actually loved, not just one that paid the bills. In the beginning, his meaning created despair. Later, a new meaning created freedom. The event never changed, but his reality did. Life constantly gives us these moments where 2 people share the same experience but see entirely different worlds. Think about a rainy day at a wedding. Some guests groan, annoyed that the weather has ruined the ceremony. Others laugh, splash through puddles, and say, "Rain on your wedding day means blessings." It's the same weather, the same gray clouds, but one group sees disaster and the other sees magic. Which one is real? Both. Because reality isn't carved in stone. It's painted in perception. This is why I'll often hear people say things like, "Attitude is everything." But it's deeper than just attitude. It's about the story we create in our minds. If you see life as a constant series of obstacles, then every setback confirms that story. If you see life as a series of lessons, then every setback becomes a classroom. The same event either confirms defeat or fuels growth, depending on the narrative you choose. Take sports as an example. 2 athletes can lose the same game. One goes home discouraged, telling themselves, "I'm not cut out for this. I'll never be as good as the others." They slowly lose motivation and quit. The other athlete loses and thinks, "That's fuel. I'll train harder. I'll come back stronger." They channel the pain into discipline and eventually become champions. Same scoreboard, different reality, different destiny. One of my favorite stories that shows this truth comes from Thomas Edison. When his factory burned down in 1914, he watched his years of work and countless inventions went up in flames. His response? Instead of crumbling, he turned to his son and said, "Go get your mother and all her friends. They'll never see a fire like this again." To him, it wasn't an ending, it was a spectacle, a chance to start fresh. He later said, "I am not discouraged because every wrong attempt to scar it is another step forward." Most people would see the fire as devastation. Edison saw it as opportunity. Same flames, different reality. And haven't we all met people who go through heartbreak and come out with completely different realities? One person shuts down, convinced they will never trust again, their life defined by bitterness. Another person takes the same heartbreak and says, "This pain showed me my worth. It taught me what I deserve." They grow, they heal, and they eventually step into better relationships. Same broken heart. Two opposite realities. It makes you wonder how much of what we call reality is just interpretation. When you really think about it, the world doesn't hand us a manual for what events mean. The job loss doesn't come with a tag that says failure. The breakup doesn't arrive with a note that says unlovable. The traffic jam doesn't come with a sign that says life is against you. We write those labels ourselves. And in doing so, we shape the reality we live in. This is why two siblings raised in the same household can remember their childhoods completely differently. One might say, "Our parents were strict, and that ruined my confidence." The other might say, "Our parents were strict, and that discipline gave me strength." Same household, same parents. Two realities, born from two different interpretations. And here's the powerful part. Once you realize that reality is shaped this way, you begin to see how much power you actually have. If two people can live in completely different worlds while standing in the same room, then it means your reality is not trapped by your circumstances. It's created by your perspective. That's why some people seem to shine even in hardship. They have mastered the art of choosing a meaning that empowers them rather than destroys them. So the question becomes, when life hands you an event, which reality will you choose? Will you let it mean, "I'm done"? Or will you let it mean, "I'm just beginning"? Will you let it mean, "Life is unfair"? Or will you let it mean, "Life is teaching me"? Because the same moment can either weigh you down or lift you up, and the choice is always yours. There's a moment in every person's life when something happens, and in an instant, the world seems to fall apart. You know that sinking feeling. When your chest tightens, your throat goes dry, and your mind fills with the words, "It's over." But what if, in that very moment, you could take the same event and with a single thought, a single shift in perspective, change the way you experience it entirely? That's the power most of us forget we have. Reality is not set in stone. It's pliable, like clay, and your perspective is the hand that molds it. I remember sitting across from a man who had just gone through bankruptcy. His face looked empty, like life had been drained out of him. He told me, "Everything I worked for is gone. My life is ruined." And in that moment, that was his reality. Ruin, hopelessness, shame. I listened for a while, then asked, "What if this isn't the end, but the clearing of the ground for something stronger to be built? What if this isn't loss, but liberation?" He stared at me, confused at first, and then something softened in his eyes. That single question, that possibility of a new meaning, sparked something inside him. Months later, he told me, that conversation changed everything. I stopped seeing bankruptcy as a grave, and I started seeing it as a reset button. His circumstances didn't change overnight, but the meaning did. And once the meaning shifted, his reality shifted instantly. Think about it like this. Imagine standing on top of a mountain, looking out at a valley below. To one person, the view is breathtaking, a reminder of beauty and possibility. To another, the exact same view is terrifying, a reminder of how small and vulnerable they feel. The mountain doesn't change. The valley doesn't change. The only difference is perspective. And the fascinating part is, you can choose which lens you look through. I once heard a story of a woman who was diagnosed with a serious illness. Most people would crumble under the weight of those words. Many would see only fear, limitation, a countdown, but she chose a different perspective. She said, This diagnosis is my invitation to finally live fully, to stop postponing joy, to stop waiting for permission to do the things I love. From that day forward, she filled her days with adventure, connection, and laughter. The illness didn't vanish, but her reality was transformed because she decided to shift her perspective from fear of death to appreciation for life. This shift can happen in the smallest of moments, too. Take a traffic jam, for example. One person bangs on the steering wheel, sweating, swearing, feeling like the universe is against them. Another person, stuck in the same jam, says, "Perfect. Now I can listen to that podcast I've been meaning to catch up on." Same cars, same delay. One reality is stress. The other is opportunity. That instant shift in perspective makes a difference between an awful day and a peaceful one. It's like wearing a pair of tinted glasses. If the lenses are dark, the world looks bleak. If the lenses are bright, the world looks vibrant. And here's the truth most people don't realize. You get to choose which glasses you wear. Not once in a lifetime, not once in a year, but moment by moment, thought by thought. You can switch lenses anytime you want, and in doing so, you switch realities. The shift can be as simple as asking a different question. Instead of "why is this happening to me?" try asking, "how is this happening for me?" Instead of "what did I lose?" ask, "what can I gain from this?" Those tiny questions pull your mind in a new direction, and where the mind goes, reality follows. Let me give you another story. A young man I met was rejected from his dream university. For weeks, he drowned in disappointment, convinced that his future was over. One night, his father sat him down and said, "You think this rejection is the end, but maybe it's just a redirection." That word stuck, redirection. The boy started exploring other schools, other paths, and eventually found a program that fit him even better than the one he thought he wanted. Years later, he laughed and said, "That rejection was the best thing that ever happened to me." Do you see how quickly reality shifted? The letter of rejection was the same, but the perspective turned failure into redirection, despair into discovery. Sometimes the shift is even more immediate. Imagine standing in a storm, soaked to the bone. You can either mutter, "This is miserable," or you can laugh and say, "I haven't felt rain like this since I was a kid." In a blink, the storm goes from being your enemy to being your playground. The storm didn't change, but your experience of it did. That's the miracle of perspective. And the beauty is, you don't have to wait for years to look back and reinterpret something. You can choose right now to reframe what's happening in your life. You can say, "This challenge is teaching me strength. This loss is giving me clarity. This waiting is building my patience." The shift is instantaneous, and the relief, the empowerment, the new reality, it arrives the moment you decide to see differently. It reminds me of the words of Wayne Dyer, who said, "When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change." It sounds almost too simple, but isn't that the truth? You could stare at the same situation today and feel crushed by it, then tomorrow stare at it again and feel grateful for it. All because your perspective shifted. We often believe that change takes years, that transformation requires time. But perspective doesn't ask for time. It asks for awareness. It asks for the courage to stop, notice your story, and ask yourself if there's another way to see it. And the second you do that, your world starts to bend in a new direction. I've watched people transform grief into purpose, rejection into resilience, obstacles into opportunities, all with a single perspective shift. And when you think about it, isn't that the greatest freedom we have? That no matter what life throws our way, no one can take away our ability to choose what it means. That power is the door to a new reality. And the key has always been in your hands. There's a powerful shift that happens the moment you change the questions you ask yourself. Because questions are not just words. They are direction for the mind. Whatever question you ask, your brain will work overtime to find an answer. Ask a disempowering question like, "Why me?" And your mind will dig up every painful reason it can find. Because you're unlucky, because you're not good enough, because life is unfair. Ask a different question like, "What can I learn from this?" And suddenly your brain searches for strength, for wisdom, for opportunity. The question doesn't just guide your thoughts. It shapes your entire reality. I remember a woman telling me about her divorce. For months, she woke up every morning with the same question pounding in her head. Why me? Why did her partner leave? Why did this happen to her? Why was she left to pick up the pieces alone? And every time she asked, her mind handed her answers that kept her trapped in pain. Because you weren't worthy. Because you weren't lovable. Because you failed. Those answers carved a reality of despair around her, so heavy she could barely breathe. But one day, she told me, she got tired of her own question. She shifted. Instead of why me, she asked, what can I learn from this? That new question led to new answers. I can learn that I am stronger than I ever knew. I can learn that I must love myself first. I can learn that endings can be beginnings. The divorce hadn't changed, but the question had, and because of that, her reality did too. Life constantly gives us challenges, but it's the questions we ask in those moments that decide whether we crumble or rise. Picture two men who both lose their jobs on the same day. One slumps into despair, asking, why does this always happen to me? His mind reminds him of every time he's failed, every door that closed, every mistake he's made. His energy drops, his confidence evaporates, and he gives up searching. The other man, faced with the same loss, takes a deep breath and asks, what can I do with this? What can I build now? What new path is opening for me? His mind starts searching for possibility, for action, for hope. Same event, different question, different reality. I think of Nelson Mandela, who spent 27 years behind prison walls. Imagine if his question had been, why me? Why is life so unfair? He could have wasted his life in bitterness. But instead, he asked, what can I learn from this? How can I prepare myself when I am free? That question gave him purpose. It turned prison into a school of patience, resilience, and leadership. Years later, when he walked out of those gates, he didn't come out broken. He came out ready to lead a nation. That's the difference an empowering question makes. Even in small daily moments, this truth shows up. You spill coffee on yourself before a big meeting. Ask, why me? And you'll spend the whole morning annoyed, embarrassed, feeling like the world is against you. Ask, what can I do now? And maybe you laugh, clean it up, and decide to use it as an icebreaker when you walk into the room. The event is small, but the question shapes whether your day is heavy or light. Questions have a way of directing not just our thoughts, but our emotions. Why me? Creates a tunnel vision of pain. It shuts the door on growth. It hands you the role of a victim. But what can I learn from this? Pulls your eyes upward. It forces your brain to search for meaning, for strength, for ways to rise. It doesn't mean the pain disappears. It means the pain is given a purpose. And pain with a purpose feels different than pain without one. I met a young man who had been cut from his basketball team. He was devastated. For days, he asked, why me? Why didn't they pick me? Why do I always fail? His confidence dropped, and he considered quitting the sport altogether. Then one of his coaches sat him down and asked him a different question. What can you learn from this? What do you need to improve? That moment shifted everything. Instead of drowning in why me, he began to see the cut as feedback. He worked on his weak points, practiced harder than ever, and the next season, he made the team, all because one question flipped his reality. The human brain is like a search engine. Type in, why am I such a failure? And we'll pull up every reason, every memory, every piece of evidence to prove you right. Type in, what can I do to grow? And it will pull up solutions, ideas, paths you hadn't noticed before. The quality of your questions determines the quality of your life. I once heard someone say, don't ask for life to be easier. Ask for yourself to be stronger. That struck me deeply because it reminds us that the right question doesn't avoid challenge. It transforms it. Asking why me is like staring at a locked door, convinced there's no way out. Asking what can I learn is like searching for the key. Suddenly, doors begin to open. Even in grief, this shift matters. A man who lost his father told me he spent months asking, why me? Why did I have to lose him? The answers his mind gave him only deepened his sorrow. But when he finally asked, what can I carry forward from my father's life? What did he teach me that I can keep alive? His grief softened into gratitude. Instead of drowning in loss, he started walking with a legacy. The reality of his father's passing didn't change, but the question gave him a new way to live with it. If you think about it, every breakthrough begins with a new question. Every invention, every discovery, every change in human history came because someone asked, "What if," or "How can I?" instead of "Why can't I?" Edison asked, "How can I make light?" The Wright brothers asked, "What if humans could fly?" Every step forward is born from the courage to ask better questions. So when life knocks you down, the real power isn't in the event. It's in the question that follows. Will you ask, "Why me?" and sink deeper into the weight of it? Or will you ask, "What can I learn? What can I do? How can this shape me?" Because the answer to that question will shape your future more than the event itself ever could. There's a moment between what happens to you and how you respond. A tiny gap that most people rush past without noticing. In that space live your greatest power, the power to choose. But to use it, you first have to become aware of the story running in your mind. That's why the formula is so simple yet so life-changing. Catch the thought, challenge it, and choose differently. I remember meeting a man who constantly described himself as unlucky. Every time something went wrong, if he spilled his coffee, if traffic made him late, if a deal fell through, he would shake his head and mutter, "Of course, that's just my life. Nothing ever works out for me." He had built his entire reality on that thought. And because he believed it, he noticed every little thing that went wrong while ignoring the moments that went right. His life wasn't cursed. His thoughts were. I told him, what if you could just catch that thought in the moment, instead of letting it run the whole show? Catching the thought is like turning on the light in a dark room. You finally see what's been hiding there all along. Without awareness, thoughts become background noise, shaping your mood and your choices without your permission. But when you stop and notice, wait, I'm telling myself I'm unlucky right now, you've already started to take back control. The next step is to challenge it. And this is where the shift begins. Imagine if every thought was like a lawyer presenting a case in court. Just because it speaks doesn't mean it's telling the truth. When you challenge a thought, you're the judge demanding evidence. So when a man said, "Nothing ever works out for me," I asked him, is that really true? Think about your life. Are there moments where things did work out? Times when you succeeded, times when you were helped, times when you were lucky? He paused and slowly began to recall them. The scholarship he had won in college, the time a friend introduced him to his wife, the job opportunity that came unexpectedly. Suddenly, the case his thought had been making for years began to crumble. Challenging the thought poked holes in its authority. And once you've caught it and challenged it, the final step is to choose differently. That's where freedom lives. Because no matter what story your mind tells, you always have the ability to create a new one. Instead of repeating, "Nothing works out for me," he tried saying, "Sometimes things work out for me, and sometimes they don't, but every time I learn something." That one choice shifted the energy completely. He wasn't cursed anymore. He was human, learning, growing. And the moment he chose differently, his reality began to change. It reminds me of a story I once read about a young woman training for a marathon. Every morning, she would wake up and hear the thought, "You're too tired. You're not cut out for this. Stay in bed." At first, she believed it and hit the snooze button. But one day, she decided to catch the thought. She paused and said, "Hold on, that's just my mind resisting discomfort. It doesn't mean it's true." She challenged it by asking, "What if I'm stronger than I think? What if this is exactly what I need?" And then she chose differently. She got out of bed, laced her shoes, and ran. Months later, she crossed the finish line of her first marathon with tears streaming down her face. The formula wasn't complicated. It was simply about refusing to let the first thought dictate the ending of the story. The human mind produces thousands of thoughts a day, many of them recycled, many of them automatic, and a huge portion of them negative. Left unchecked, those thoughts create the prison of our reality. But when you catch them, you interrupt the pattern. When you challenge them, you weaken their grip. And when you choose differently, you rewrite the script. I think about a boy I once mentored who struggled with self-doubt. Whenever he faced a challenge, his first thought was always, "I can't do this." That thought had been planted years earlier by people who told him he wasn't good enough. For so long, he let it define him, but I taught him the formula. One day, he was standing before a math test and felt that same thought arise, I can't do this. Instead of surrendering, he caught it. He whispered to himself, there's that thought again. Then he challenged it. Is it true that I can't do this? Or is it just fear speaking? He remembered the times he had solved problems before, times he had figured things out, and then he chose differently. He told himself, I might not know everything, but I can try. I can give my best. That choice calmed him. He passed the test. It wasn't magic. It was awareness, courage, and choice. This formula works in relationships too. Imagine a couple arguing. One partner thinks, they don't care about me. They never listen. If they believe that thought without catching it, the fight escalates. But if they stop and notice it, catch it, then challenge it. Is it true they don't care, or are they just tired, stressed, distracted? And then choose differently. Maybe I can approach this with compassion instead of blame. Suddenly the entire reality of the relationship changes. Same words, same people, but a new meaning creates a new outcome. There's a quote I once came across. You don't have to believe every thought that crosses your mind. That sentence is pure freedom, because thoughts are not commands. They're not laws. They're suggestions. And you are not your thoughts. You're the one who observes them, challenges them, and decides which ones get to stay. Even in moments of deep pain, this formula can be the lifeline. A man grieving the loss of his brother told me he was consumed by the thought, I can't go on without him. That thought, repeated over and over, was crushing him. I gently asked him to try the formula. He caught it, noticed it, held it in the light. He challenged it, asking, is it true I can't go on? Or is it that I don't want to imagine going on? Didn't my brother himself tell me to keep living, to be strong? And then he chose differently. Instead of clinging to I can't go on, he chose, I will carry him with me as I go on. That one shift didn't erase the grief, but it gave him the strength to keep breathing, to keep moving. This is why the formula matters. Because life will always throw thoughts at you. Fearful ones, angry ones, hopeless ones. But you are not powerless. You can catch them like butterflies in a net, examine them, decide if they're worth keeping, and if they're not, you can release them and choose differently. And in that choice lies the difference between a life of reaction and a life of creation. There's a moment when you caught the thought, you've challenged it, you've even chosen differently, but then a question arises deep inside. What now? Because thoughts alone can shift your perspective for a moment. But to transform your reality, they need roots. And roots are planted through action. New beliefs are fragile when they're only in your head. But when you anchor them with action, they harden into unshakable truth. I remember meeting a young woman who told me she believed she was unworthy of success. She had been repeating affirmations for weeks, writing in journals, whispering to herself that she was good enough. But nothing seemed to stick. Every time life tested her, she collapsed back into the same old story. I asked her one simple question. What's the smallest action you could take today that proves this new belief is true? She hesitated, then said, I guess applying for that job I've been afraid of. That moment was powerful, because belief without action is like writing a song and never singing it. She applied, and even though she didn't get the job, something inside her shifted. The act of applying proved to her, I am someone who tries, I am someone who dares. That single step anchored her new belief more than 1,000 repeated words could. Think about how we learn as children. A toddler can believe they might be able to walk, but the belief doesn't become real until they wobble forward on those tiny feet. They fall, they cry, they get up again. Every action is a vote cast for a new identity. And slowly, with each step, the belief that I can walk becomes undeniable. The same principle follows us into adulthood, yet we often forget it. We want to think our way into confidence, into strength, into change. But the truth is that confidence grows from action. Courage comes from moving, not waiting. I knew a man who had been paralyzed by fear of public speaking for years. His belief was, I'm terrible at speaking in front of people. He tried to change it by reading books on confidence, watching videos, even repeating affirmations. But his fear held firm until the day he forced himself to stand up in a small meeting at work and speak for 2 minutes. His voice shook, his hands trembled, but he did it. That 2-minute action anchored new belief. Maybe I can do this. And each time he spoke again, he poured cement into the foundation of that belief until it stood taller than the fear. Anchoring belief with action isn't about giant leaps. It's about consistent, small steps that reinforce the story you want to live. A woman who tells herself, "I am healthy," can't simply think it into reality. But the moment she chooses to prepare a nourishing meal, take a walk, or drink water instead of soda, she is embodying that belief. Action is embodiment, and embodiment transforms thought into identity. There's a saying, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. What are systems if not repeated actions? Believing you are disciplined is one thing, but waking up early, showing up to the gym, finishing your work on time, that's how discipline becomes your reality. Each action is like driving a stake in the ground, saying, "This is who I am now." Sometimes people tell me, "But I don't feel like taking action yet." I'll start when I believe it fully. I remind them that action doesn't follow belief. It builds it. If you wait until you feel ready, you'll wait forever. The secret is to move first, even if your legs shake, and let your heart catch up. When you take action in alignment with your new belief, your nervous system starts to adapt, your mind starts to adjust, and suddenly the impossible starts to feel natural. I once heard the story of a soldier who returned home with deep wounds, both physical and emotional. He carried the thought, "I'll never be the same. I can't live a normal life again." For months, he stayed isolated, drowning in despair. But one day, he decided to test that thought. He chose a simple action, volunteering at a community garden. The act of planting seeds, working with his hands, connecting with people, gave him a sense of purpose again. Slowly, new actions anchor new belief. I can contribute. I still matter. That garden became his therapy, and that action rewrote his reality. It doesn't matter how small the step is. What matters is consistency. Think of it like training a muscle. The first time you lift a weight, it feels impossible. But with each repetition, the muscle strengthens. Your beliefs are the same. Each action aligned with your new story is a rep that builds inner strength until belief is unshakable. Action also silences the voice of doubt. You can argue with yourself for hours, wondering, can I really do this? Do I have what it takes? But once you act, the debate ends. Action speaks louder than thought. When a painter paints, they stop doubting whether they're an artist. The brush in their hand answers a question. When a writer writes, they no longer wonder if they can create. The page proves it. I once asked a group of students to share their biggest fear. One girl said, "I'm terrified of being seen. I've always been invisible, and maybe that's who I am." I gave her a challenge. "Tomorrow, raise your hand in class just once." That was it. The next day, she did it. Her heart raced. Her voice was shaky, but she answered a question. She came back to me glowing, saying, "I did it. I was seen." That tiny action cracked open the door to a new belief. Maybe I'm not invisible after all. And from that moment, she kept raising her hand until she no longer questioned her place in the room. The power of anchoring beliefs with action is that it turns maybe into definitely. It takes the fragile hope of a thought and transforms it into solid ground you can stand on. Without action, beliefs are like seeds left on the table. They hold potential, but they never grow roots. With action, they become trees that weather storms and stand strong. So if you want to change your reality immediately, ask yourself not just, what do I believe, but what can I do right now that proves it? Maybe it's sending the message you've been afraid to send. Maybe it's speaking up in the meeting. Maybe it's walking outside for 10 minutes. Maybe it's writing the first page of that book. Whatever it is, let your actions declare the truth before your thoughts fully believe it. Because when you catch the thought, challenge it, and choose differently, the story begins to shift. But when you anchor that new story with action, it becomes unshakable. And with each step you take, each choice you make, you carve your new reality into the world. Not just in your mind, but in your life that MY friends. You don't have to wait for tomorrow. You don't have to wait for the perfect moment, the perfect plan, or the perfect version of yourself. Change doesn't live in the future. Change lives in this moment, right now, in the choice you make next. You have the power to catch the thought. You have the power to challenge it. You have the power to choose differently. And you have the power to anchor that choice with action. Every second that passes is an invitation. An invitation to rewrite the story. An invitation to stop waiting, stop doubting, stop rehearsing your pain, and start living your power. So I ask you, what will you do with this moment? Will you leave here the same, carrying the same weight, repeating the same story? Or will you decide here and now to step into the reality you were born for? Don't wait. Don't hesitate. Don't postpone the life that's calling your name. Because the secret isn't hidden in some distant future. The secret is this: change your thought, change your choice, change your action, change your reality. Say it with me. Change your thought, change your choice, change your action, change your reality. And when you walk out of here tonight, don't just remember these words. Live them, prove them. Let your life scream louder than your fears ever did. Because in the end, reality doesn't change when time passes. Reality changes when you do. And the moment you decide is the moment it begins. So decide now, because your new reality is already waiting for you. Your support means everything if this resonated with you. Please share and subscribe. And remember this, reality doesn't happen to you. It happens through you. Thank you for being here. See you in the next one.